Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I have another Starlink accessory review for you today. Seems like there's a ton of third-party Starlink accessories coming out, which is exciting for me because I love Starlink hardware and any kind of accessories that I can get my hand on. So we've all used, these kind of portable power stations, right? Since really the beginning of Starlink, people have been looking to use these for portable applications like using their Starlink for camping or other off-grid scenarios. And then more recently, people are interested in running their Starlinks directly off of DC power to maximize efficiency. Now these are great because they have, built-in inverter, everything, but there's some drawbacks to that. And the accessory that I have to show you today is a portable power station specifically designed for Starlink. This is the XTAR-LINK EL8 Pro. Now this thing, it looks a lot like my EcoFlow River 2 over here, but the most impressive thing is that this packs a 648 watt hour, let me double check that, 648 watt hour battery inside, while my EcoFlow River 2 is under 300 watt hours. And they're roughly, the same size. So that's why this EL8 Pro is so impressive and why I wanted to bring it on the channel and do a review today, because this is dedicated for use with Starlink. So let me dive in a little bit more, talk about this EL8 Pro. So as you can see on the front, you have several different ports here. Let me walk you through everything. So you have this massive LCD screen on the front. Obviously that's your kind of command center. That's how you view the status of all these ports. But I want to direct your attention over to the right side of the unit, because this is kind of where the magic happens. You notice there's no AC plugs anywhere on this, and that's because it doesn't have an inverter inside of it. You have a PoE port at the top and then a LAN port on the bottom. And that's because this has a built-in PoE injector. This is designed to output either 48 volts or 56 volts DC over power over Ethernet, or PoE, to your Starlink dish. That means this is compatible with all of the consumer versions of Starlink. So it's compatible with the Gen 2 standard actuated, the Gen 3 standard, and also the Starlink Mini. It's got user selectable PoE output, so you can change between 48 volts for the Gen 2 and the Mini, and then 56 volts if you have a Gen 3 standard. So you would be able to plug your Starlink Gen 3 standard or whatever dish you have directly into the PoE port and power it that way right off of this battery. No inverter necessary, no other equipment necessary. Now your router, you can power a third-party router, or you can use a Starlink router as well and plug it into this LAN port. And I'll show you the setup with a Gen 3 system here in a moment, but let me finish going through the rest of these ports. You have a 12 volt, this is a DC 5521 output port that is mainly for powering third-party routers or other kinds of routers. And then you have a PoE switch to kind of activate that. On the other side, you have some auxiliary output ports. So these are a couple of USB-A ports and a USB-C port as well. These are for charging and powering other devices. These are not bidirectional, so you can only output power to your devices, but this will also be useful if you had a router that had a USB-A power supply or USB-C power supply. You could also power your router off of this. But mainly these are going to be used for powering a laptop or other device. You also have over here the input port. So let me show you the box that it comes with, because the EL8 Pro comes with several different accessories and cables. One of those is your AC wall adapter. So you can plug, to charge this thing, you can plug this into a wall outlet. On the other end, it's got this DC 5521 port that plugs into the input port right there. That's how you would charge it from a wall outlet. This is also going to be compatible with solar though too, or even car charging. So this has a built-in MPPT solar charger. So if you have a portable solar panel, you can plug it right in here if you have a DC 5521 adapter cable for it, and this will handle all the charging for it. All it needs is a solar input, and then it will charge off of that. This is bi-directional as well. It can output PoE power to your Starlink while you're charging at the same time through either a car charger, the wall charger, or even solar. Speaking of car charger for this, so it doesn't come with the adapter cable, but these are fairly cheap on Amazon. I have this one right here. This is just a 12 volt car to DC 5521, and this could plug right in there to charge this thing while you're driving down the road between campsites or something in your vehicle. So it does have this massive LCD screen. Let's go ahead and power this thing on. You just hold down the power button for a couple seconds and it powers on. Gives you initially, the state of charge as well as the voltage and any amperage if you have any outputs. When you plug in devices, whether it be on the USB side or the PoE side, you'll get additional information about what's going on with those ports, like the power draw, current, voltage, that sort of thing. And then you also have some settings in here. Remember, like I said before, you can select between 48 volt PoE for the Mini or the Gen 2 standard, and then you can select 56 volts if you have a Gen 3 standard. So that's the power supply. As far as on the back, this is also super interesting because, let me just turn this off real quick. On the back here, you actually have a user serviceable battery, which is fairly rare for power stations, for battery power stations. So they include the wrench too, but you can take out these screws. This reveals the battery that's inside. It's a 648 watt hour lithium ion battery. You can replace it yourself if you ever get to that point where you have this power station for so long that you've noticed some degradation. But you can also swap out smaller batteries. So they also offer a smaller, under 300 watt hour battery for this. That makes this package a lot lighter if you don't need the full 648 watt hours. So it's super cool that they offer, a user serviceable, user repairable design here. Looking over the rest of the case, it's pretty simple. You have some rubber feet on the bottom, and then it's just like this smooth kind of plastic. This is waterproof and dustproof. It's designed to be used outdoors, so you can use this out in weather if you need to. It's got a carrying handle on the top. As far as the overall design and quality and everything, I will say it's, pretty cheap plastic on the outside. The texture is not very good. It just kind of feels cheap, but it does the job. The handle on the top, however, kind of reminds me of like a 1970s or 80s briefcase handle. This thing feels super cheap, but again, it's functional. It's not the highest quality exterior or materials though. So let's check out what else comes in the kit as far as your accessories go, because there's a lot of important components. I want to start out with actually this thing right here. So this is your Gen 2 standard actuated adapter cable. So if you have a Gen 2 standard, you can use this, select 48 volts on the PoE output, and then you would plug this into the PoE port. And then this is an adapter that accepts the weird proprietary connector that Gen 2 Starlink dishes used. So you'd be able to plug your dish right into there, and then you hook up a router to the LAN port, and you can power that router with this port or one of the USB ports. If you have a Starlink Mini, that's what this cable is for. This is actually kind of used for both the Gen 3 standard and the Mini, but this is an RJ45 connector on one end and then the DC5521 on the other end. This has got those waterproof seals that Starlink uses, so you could plug this directly into this port right here and then plug the other end into your Mini if it's going to be close by. This cable's not very long, and they thought of that because they also sent you this little coupler. So this is a DC5521 coupler that allows you to plug right onto this cable, and you can actually use your 50-foot DC power cable that comes with the Starlink Mini kit. So you can have plenty of length as far as cabling goes, and since this is 48 volts of DC, you don't have to worry about any voltage drop or sagging or anything like that. So this coupler, it's really nice. It's a very cheap, simple design, a simple accessory, but it's really nice that they include this, because that means you don't have to buy anything extra. You can just use this cable in combination with any other Starlink Mini DC cable to have this set up in one place and then have your Mini set up further away. In this review today, I'm going to be using the EL8 Pro with my Gen 3 standard Starlink unit. Now, if you've seen any of my previous videos, I've had trouble in the past using portable power stations with the Gen 3 standard. It uses quite a bit of wattage. It wants up to 150 watts or so during boot up. And a lot of the 12 volt outlets on the power stations, like my Pecron back there and even the EcoFlow River 3, these outlets are not rated for that high wattage. So I've really been limited to just using the AC inverter inside of those and just plugging in, the Gen 3 power supply and the router and everything like that. But that's not the most efficient way to do it. See, XTAR-LINK claims the EL8 Pro is up to 30% more efficient than using an inverter in a regular portable power bank. It's just interesting that this is designed specifically to power those standard units without any extra componentry. And the way that you hook up the Gen 3 standard is pretty cool as well. So you have this cable. This one is not just for the mini, but it's also for the standard as well. So you take this and you plug it into your PoE port. And if you want to use the Starlink Gen 3 router, if you're not going to be using a third-party router, the setup is even more simple. So you take your Gen 3 router and you plug this into the power input of the Gen 3 router. Oops. And then you just take your Starlink standard Gen 3 cable. You know, this is the cable that runs to the dish. So you'd plug it into the router just like normal. Nothing special to it there. And then plug in your dish, turn this on, and you're good to go. That's a super simple setup if you don't mind using the Gen 3 router with your standard dish setup. Now, if you want to use a third-party router, it's a little bit different. So you're not going to be using this cable. You're going to be using the Starlink standard cable plugged in directly to the PoE port. And then let's get rid of these. Now for demonstration purposes here, I have a router mini. Let's pretend like this is our third-party router. So with the router mini, it's got a 9-volt USB or 9-volt DC input. So I'm going to power this off of, let's say, USB-C over here. This would work fine. That's how I'm going to power my third-party router. And then I take just any old Ethernet cable like this one here, plug it into the LAN port of the EL8 Pro. And that's how you would have a setup for a third-party router with the Gen 3 standard dish. Okay, so that's basically everything. That's the overview of the XTAR-LINK EL8 Pro. Now I kind of want to put it to the test though, because they claim that the EL8 Pro, when running the Starlink Mini, is capable of a 24-hour runtime. Now the Mini doesn't use very much power. It uses around 20 to 25 watts. So I'm going to be testing this with the Gen 3 standard dish because I've done plenty of Starlink Mini battery runtime tests. So the Mini uses about half the power of the standard, so this should have around 12 hours of runtime with the Gen 3 standard, which is really, really impressive. You know, if you're taking this thing camping, you could have this in the back of your car charging up on the way out there. And then once you get there, you're off grid, you could plug in your standard dish and you could have, you know, a full internet service for half the day, unplugging it, you know, overnight, obviously when you're not using it, but then plugging it back in during the day. And you could have essentially a full day's worth of internet usage. You can extend that even more if you plug in a solar panel. So let's get this outside. I'll show you how to set it up with the standard, and we'll see how long this battery can last. So I'm set up over here in the shade today because it is such a hot day today. We're in a heat wave here in Missouri, but you can see my Starlink standard Gen 3 dish out here just in the middle of my yard. That's going to be set up over there. This is an area that I know is free of obstructions and everything like that, but I do have it just run back as far as the cable goes over here to where I have the EL8 just sitting on the ground. And I'm going to be using, in my opinion, the most simple setup with the Starlink Gen 3 router. So let me show you how easy this thing is to hook up as far as the wiring goes. So all you really need for this setup right here is the adapter cable that comes with the EL8 Pro. So you're going to plug in the DC barrel plug end of it into the power input of the Gen 3 router, and then you're going to plug in the RJ45 part of it into the PoE port of the EL8 Pro, just like that. Now your Starlink cable that comes from your standard Gen 3 dish is going to come over here, and you're going to plug it into the antenna port on the back of the Gen 3 router. And now your cabling is complete. That's all you need. No modifications, completely plug and play with the EL8 Pro. Now, before we turn this thing on, actually, let me unplug this because I need to show you how to change it from 48 volts, which is the default PoE for the Gen 2 and the Mini, to 56 volts, which is what we need for the standard. So turn the unit off, make sure it's off, and then hold down the PoE button for 3 seconds. This comes up on the screen. You can see 48 volts. Let me try this angle. Probably a little bit better. There we go.
So you can see now that we have the flashing. If you don't do it quick enough, it'll turn off. So hold the PoE button 3 seconds. This pops up. Press the PoE button again. Change it to 57 volts. Press and hold PoE for 3 seconds to save your setting. It turns off. Now we're on 56 volts, the correct voltage for the Starlink standard. So now we're going to plug in our PoE again. And we can make note of the time. Let me just check. So I just checked the time. It's 1 o'clock p.m. and this thing should run for about 12 hours. So it'll be late into the night when this thing is finally done. I'll probably just wait and do a recap and my final thoughts of this in the morning for you. But I'm gonna go ahead and turn it on by holding the on-off button for a few seconds. So now we have power applied to our Starlink, and I do need to hit the PoE button to activate that. You can see the switch here turns blue, indicating that I am good to go. And we're already starting to see some wattage go to the Starlink. Let's watch this thing, how it boots up. So right now it's just 2.9 watts as it initially sends some wattage to the mini or to the Gen 3 router just to make sure it's woken up and negotiate the voltages and everything like that. Trying to reduce the glare on the screen as much as possible. So we're starting to see it ramp up a little bit, 6 watts. And now we're over 100 watts, indicating that the dish is now powered on. It's sending full boot up power to the Gen 3 standard. Like I had mentioned earlier, this can use up to 150 watts on occasion during boot up and in snow melting situations. Now, as we sit here and wait for this thing to finally come online, I did want to mention the claim by XTAR-LINK that this is 30% more efficient than using an inverter, and that can be true, but it really just depends on what inverter you're using. So I've done testing previously with like the Pecron. I've got an E600 LFP. That's a portable power station with an inverter, and I've hooked up Starlink to it. And what I've seen is that smaller inverters, like with the Pecron, can be anywhere from 5 to 10% in losses that you incur just by using the AC to DC inverter process. With this, you don't have any of those conversions. So it's PoE directly hooked up to a DC battery. So no inverter losses whatsoever like you would get if you're plugging it into an AC outlet. Now the claim of 30%, sure, if you have, a big inverter like in your RV, like, if you have a 1,000, 2,000 watt inverter, you can save quite a bit of power by running your standard dish directly off of DC, because that inverter is having to run. It's such a big inverter for such a small load, under 100 watts usually, more like 50 or 60 watts on average with the Gen 3 standard system. So that's where they come up with that number. Again, it just depends on the size of the inverter that you have. This solution right here is less about the efficiency for me and more about the simplicity. I think that's really why people are gonna buy this. So just look how simple the setup is. I didn't have to do any modification at all to my Gen 3 standard dish, and I just plug it right into a power station that's dedicated and exclusively designed to power Starlink. And also the fact that it powers all the Starlinks. So you have the Gen 2, the Gen 3, and the Mini. No matter what Starlink you have, you'll be able to use this to power your Starlink off-grid in probably the most efficient way, directly off of battery to PoE. So I just checked in with the Starlink app. Everything's good. We're online. We're connected. So the test has started. I will update you when this thing dies to give you a final result on how long the EL8 Pro is able to power my Starlink standard unit. It'll probably be over 12 hours, so it'll be late into the night for this test, but I'll check in with you in the morning. Well guys, it is the next morning and got the final result here. So we got a 0% state of charge all the way down to almost 18 volts there on this EL8 Pro. So it did not last the 12 hours claimed. I turned this on and began the test at exactly 1 p.m. yesterday. And the last check-in, according to the Starlink website account dashboard for this antenna right here, was at 11 p.m., almost exactly 11 p.m. So final result, 10 hours. 10 hours was the battery runtime for this. So a couple hours short of what XTAR-LINK claimed this would be capable of. And I did check the Starlink app throughout the evening, just to kind of see what the power usage was from the standard Starlink. And I saw about an average of 47 watts for the most part for this test. And that's pretty typical of what I see with my residential standard dish as well, which is the same equipment. That doesn't account for the router usage though. That's just the power consumption by the antenna that's reported in the app. So this adds probably another 5 to 10 watts, I would say. So that explains some of that difference. But I think also what happened was that the battery in this thing isn't 57 volts, which is what it outputs to the PoE. The battery's something like 26 volts or something like that. I forget exactly what it is. So there is a step-up conversion going on inside the EL8 Pro. And I'm guessing that contributes to some of the losses that we would see, because a 648 watt hour battery should be able to last more than 10 hours with a, let's say, 55 watt load on the system. So, but still, 10 hours is still pretty good. That's a full workday. That's more than a full workday if you were needing to use this EL8 Pro off-grid with a standard Starlink dish. And if you were using the Mini, you would see about double that. So probably around 20 hours of runtime with the EL8 Pro and the Starlink Mini. Now the Gen 2 standard uses a little bit less power than the Gen 3, so probably closer to 10.5, 11 hours for the Gen 2. So as far as my impressions and review of the EL8 Pro, first of all, the price. I haven't mentioned that in this video. That's because I don't know. This is actually a pre-release review. So this product has not even come out yet. It's not really available. It will be available shortly after I post this review. So I'm not sure on the price. I will keep a link in the description for the product page of this. So whenever that comes out, you'll have that information readily available. But I think what it comes down to is with the EL8 Pro is, do you need a portable power station for your Starlink? And what other devices do you plan on using with that portable power bank? Because the advantage of something like the EL8 Pro, it doesn't have the AC inverter, it doesn't have all the extra stuff because it's primarily designed to power Starlink. And what that means is that you have a smaller and lighter form factor compared to some of the other power stations with an equivalent size battery. And that means longer run times for your Starlink in a smaller and lighter package, which is a great thing. Another advantage of the EL8 Pro is that it allows you to do third-party routers much more easily, especially with the Starlink standard dish. So with the Gen 3, you just plug in your cable to the PoE output port, plug in your router to the LAN port, and you're good to go. You can even use the Starlink router if you're not interested in using a third-party router, but EL8 Pro just makes it so easy to do that. It's also nice that it's compatible with all three of the consumer Starlinks. So Gen 2, Gen 3, and Mini can all be used with this. Doesn't matter which Starlink you have. You'll be able to power it directly off of DC right over PoE. And I don't really know of any other portable power station that can power the Starlink standard Gen 3 directly off of DC. A lot of the other ones, like my Pecron, is a similar capacity as far as battery capacity goes, but the 12 volt output, the DC outputs on that thing are just not enough to actually power the standard. A lot of those power stations, they're meant to output higher wattage on the AC ports with the inverter, but they're not necessarily designed to output over 100 watts on any of the DC ports. So overall here, if you're looking for a portable power station to use basically just with your Starlink, I don't think you can go wrong with the EL8 Pro. It provides a full workday of battery life for your Starlink standard and 2 days worth for your Starlink Mini if that's what you're using. It's a small, lightweight battery bank designed exclusively for Starlink and really nothing else, even though it does have some of those auxiliary USB ports to charge all your devices. So if you have any questions or feedback on the XTAR-LINK EL8 Pro, let me know in the comments below. As always, I really appreciate you watching. See you in the next video.